They asked 10,000 German prisoners the same question: what do you fear most on the battlefield? Not the Sherman tanks rolling across French fields. Not the thunderbolts screaming down from cloudless skies. Artillery, the answer came back again and again. From soldiers pulled out of foxholes in Normandy. From tank crews captured near the Bulge. From officers interrogated in makeshift prison camps across France and Belgium, always the same answer: American artillery. It's June 1944. The hedgerows of Normandy. A German infantryman crouches in a trench, hands trembling as he lights a cigarette. He survived 3 years on the Eastern Front. Stalingrad. Kursk. He thought he'd seen the worst war could offer, then he heard the sound. High-pitched. Distant. Like a lawnmower buzzing somewhere above the clouds, the Piper Cub. He throws the cigarette down. Stamps it out. Yells to his squad. Take cover. Now. They scatter. Diving into foxholes. Pressing their bodies flat against cold earth. He checks his watch. 3 minutes. Maybe less. That's all the time they have. Across the Atlantic, years before this moment, a handful of American artillery officers sat in classrooms at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. They studied the previous war. The Great War. They pored over casualty reports. Battle assessments. Mountains of data that all pointed to one undeniable truth: artillery had been the killer. More men died from shells than bullets. More than gas. More than anything else that war had thrown at them. But there was a problem: the system was broken. Batteries fired independently. Each gun crew calculated their own firing solutions. Commanders shouted orders across muddy fields. Coordination was a nightmare. Massing fire from multiple batteries required days of planning, and in combat, you don't have days, you have minutes, sometimes seconds. Major Carlos Brewer saw it first. He was teaching at Fort Sill in the late 1920s, watching young officers struggle with firing tables and protractors. Watching them waste time on calculations that should have been simple. He started sketching solutions on chalkboards. New charts. Better survey methods. Ways to plot gun positions that actually made sense, but he couldn't solve the real problem: the math. Converting target coordinates into gun settings still took too long. Even with his improved charts, battery commanders needed 12 to 15 minutes to compute firing data. 20 minutes if conditions were bad. That was an eternity on a battlefield. Then came Major Orlando Ward. Ward arrived at Fort Sill in 1932 with a radical idea. What if individual battery commanders didn't compute their own firing data? What if everything was centralized at battalion level, one fire direction center? Controlling every gun in the battalion simultaneously. The idea was revolutionary. And it was terrifying to traditionalists who believed battery commanders needed autonomy, but Ward pushed forward. He built the first fire direction center. Tested it. Refined it. And in the spring of 1931, he demonstrated what centralized control could do: multiple batteries. Different locations. All firing at the exact same target. At the exact same moment, the shells arrived together. A simultaneous thunderclap of destruction that obliterated the target before anyone could react. Observers were stunned. This wasn't just faster. This was a completely different weapon, but the system still had a weakness. The calculations. Even with centralization, fire direction officers spent hours learning to use firing tables. Thick books filled with thousands of data points. Finding the right numbers, interpolating between values, accounting for wind and temperature and a dozen other variables. It worked. But it was slow. November 1940. Fort Sill. Captain Abbott Burns sat at his desk late into the night. He was exhausted. Frustrated. Tired of what he called the slow torture of intricate mathematics. There had to be a better way. He grabbed a pencil. Started sketching. By dawn, he had it: the graphical firing table. A transparent sheet. A specialized slide rule. Fire direction officers could lay it on their firing chart, align it with battery and target positions, and read the firing data directly. No calculation required. Burns tested it. The device was 20 times faster than traditional methods. 20 times, and it didn't require years of training. Enlisted soldiers with basic arithmetic skills could operate it. The graphical firing table changed everything. By 1942, when American forces hit the beaches of North Africa, every artillery battalion had fire direction centers equipped with these devices. The combination of centralized control and instant computation created something no army had ever seen. 3-minute response time, from target identification to shells landing. 3 minutes, the Germans couldn't believe it, their own system needed 12 to 15 minutes. Sometimes 20. And that was for a single battery firing independently. The Americans were coordinating multiple batteries across several kilometers. Different guns. Different locations. All firing at precisely calculated intervals so every shell arrived within a 3-second window. They called it time on target. Imagine you're a German soldier, dug into a defensive position. You hear the whistle of incoming shells. You drop. Press yourself into the dirt, the first explosion hits, you survive, but instead of more shells landing one by one, giving you time to stay down, find better cover, maybe even run, everything detonates at once, dozens of shells. Hundreds. All arriving in the same instant, the entire bombardment compressed into 3 seconds of hell. You don't hear it coming. You don't have time to react. Most artillery casualties happen in those first few seconds. Before soldiers can take cover. Before they can respond, time on target missions maximized those critical seconds. Turned the entire fire mission into one devastating moment. The Germans had good artillery. Excellent artillery, actually. Their 105mm and 155mm guns matched American pieces in range and destructive power, but they couldn't do this. They couldn't coordinate simultaneous impact on 3 minutes' notice against a target they hadn't planned for. Their decentralized system made it impossible. The British were more sophisticated. By 1941, they developed procedures to coordinate over 100 guns in divisional concentrations. They had code names for different scales of fire. Mike targets. Uncle targets. Victor and William targets. Impressive, but still different from the American approach. British concentrations achieved rapid massing of fire. But they didn't emphasize simultaneous impact the way Americans did. Shells arrived over a short period. Close together. But not that precise 3-second window. The difference seems subtle. It wasn't. The Soviets took a completely different approach. They had enormous numbers of guns. Staggering numbers. And they used them for massive bombardments that lasted hours. At Kursk in July 1943, Soviet artillery fired over 1.6 million shells in the opening barrage. The sheer volume was devastating, but Soviet fire control remained primitive. Shells scattered across hundreds of meters. Friendly fire incidents weren't uncommon. Their doctrine prioritized overwhelming firepower through quantity, not precision. It worked on the Eastern Front against massive concentrations of troops and armor, but it lacked flexibility. The American system was different. It was built on one principle above all others, responsiveness, and that required observers. Forward observers embedded with infantry and armor units. Trained artillery officers who understood fire direction procedures. Men who could identify targets and call for fire immediately. American doctrine placed these observers at company level. Sometimes lower. Each one had direct radio communication with battalion fire direction centers. They weren't just spotters reporting locations. They were trained professionals who could work directly with fire direction centers. Adjusting fire. Maximizing effectiveness. The SCR 610 radio became standard in 1943. It had a 20-mile range. Reliable even in difficult terrain. Observers could maintain contact even when their infantry units were cut off, surrounded. They could still call for fire, but the real revolution came from above. The L-4 Cub. A small aircraft. Military version of the Piper J-3. Modified with larger tires for rough fields. A transparent roof panel for upward visibility. Radios for ground communication, powered by a 65 horsepower engine. Top speed of 85 miles per hour. It could take off and land in less than 300 feet, dirt roads. Pastures. Anywhere. The Army Air Forces had fought against organic aviation for artillery. They wanted all aircraft under their control, but artillery officers argued that effective fire control required observers who understood artillery. Who were integrated into artillery command structures. After bureaucratic battles, the War Department approved it in 1942. Each artillery battalion received 2 L-4 aircraft. And pilots who were artillery officers themselves. From 1,500 feet, an aerial observer could see for miles. Targets invisible to ground observers suddenly became visible. Units hiding behind hills. Artillery concealed in tree lines. Supply convoys moving on roads far behind enemy lines. All visible, the observer could identify targets, estimate coordinates, and call for fire directly. More than 5,400 L4s were produced during the war. Over 2,700 served with field artillery units in Europe. German soldiers learned to recognize that sound. That high-pitched buzz. When they heard it, they knew artillery was coming. German tactical manuals from late 1944 included specific instructions. When L4 aircraft appear, cease movement immediately. Disperse to maximum extent. Take cover, they understood. Once the Cub spotted them, fire would follow within minutes. Germans tried shooting them down. Anti-aircraft guns designed for high-altitude bombers struggled with the slow, low-flying Cubs. The L4s were agile. Pilots could see flak and take evasive action. German fighters could catch them easily. But venturing into forward areas meant risking American fighter escorts. Many L4 pilots flew entire combat tours without being shot down. Despite operating constantly over enemy territory, they developed close relationships with their fire direction centers. Daily missions with the same fire direction officer. They created efficient shorthand communication. The observer would spot a target. Call it in. Shells would land within 2 to 3 minutes, then adjustment. Walking fire onto the target with precision. Sometimes achieving direct hits on individual vehicles. Single artillery pieces. The psychological effect was crushing. German forces could never feel safe. Not even in rear areas. Supply convoys had to move at night. Artillery batteries remained under cover during daylight. Reserve units couldn't assemble in obvious locations. The L4s forced constant vigilance. Limited operational freedom during every daylight hour. Fire direction centers maintained detailed maps. Friendly positions. Known enemy locations. Suspected locations. No fire zones. When an observer reported a target, the decision cycle was instant. Is the target in a safe engagement area? Which batteries are in range? How much fire is appropriate? 3 minutes. From target identification to rounds on target, this flexibility was revolutionary. German doctrine assigned specific batteries to specific units in rigid relationships. A German infantry battalion had a designated artillery battery. If they needed more fire, requesting additional support required coordination through higher headquarters. Time-consuming. Bureaucratic. American forward observers could request fire from any battery in range. The Fire Direction Center could mass fires from an entire corps if the target warranted it. General Omar Bradley noted in his memoir that during the Battle of the Bulge, artillery coordinated fire from 348 guns. Different divisions. Different corps. Spread across dozens of kilometers, all controlled through coordinated fire direction centers, all capable of massing fire on critical targets within minutes. August 7, 1944. Mortain, France. Before dawn, German forces launch Operation Luttich. A desperate counterattack attempting to cut off American forces that broke out of Normandy. They're trying to reach the coast. Cut off Patton's Third Army. The attack begins in darkness. When American air superiority can't intervene, German armor and infantry advance rapidly. Surprising American units, German commanders are hopeful. For a few hours, it seems possible, then daylight comes. L4 Cubs take to the air. Observers begin directing fire onto German columns. The 230th Field Artillery Battalion supporting the 30th Infantry Division fires thousands of rounds throughout the day. Individual batteries fire so continuously that gun barrels overheat. Ammunition stocks are depleted. Resupply trucks run constantly. The artillery fire is precise. Devastating. German tank commanders report being unable to maneuver. Every time they attempt to advance or reposition, artillery fire lands on their location within minutes. The combination of artillery and fighter-bomber attack stops the German offensive. By August 8, the attack has failed. By August 10, German forces are retreating. What was intended as a decisive counteroffensive has become a disaster. On Hill 314 near Mortain, 1st Lieutenant Ralph Kerley commands E Company, 2nd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment. German forces assault his position just after 8 in the evening on August 7. Kerley makes a decision that seems insane. He calls for artillery fire on his own position, danger close. Directly on top of his company. 84 howitzers deliver a devastating 5-minute barrage. American soldiers find whatever cover they can, surviving their own artillery. German attackers have no cover. No protection. The German attack breaks. Retreats. Kerley's willingness to call fire on his own men exemplifies the desperate nature of the fighting. and the trust American forces had in their artillery's precision. Hill 192 near St. Lo. July 1944. A key terrain feature dominating the approaches to the city. Germans have fortified it extensively. Trenches. Bunkers. Carefully positioned weapons. American forces have attacked repeatedly with limited success. German defenders have excellent fields of fire. The 2nd Infantry Division plans a deliberate attack. Massive artillery preparation. Division artillery includes 48 guns. But the Fire Direction Center calls on additional support from Corps artillery. More than 100 guns total. The attack begins July 11, 1944. American artillery fires 20 time on target missions during the night of July 10 to 11. Each mission brings massed fire from dozens of guns onto German positions. Time to prevent rest. Prevent reorganization. Every hour or two throughout the night, another massive bombardment hits. No sleep. Constant stress. On July 11, the main attack begins. The 2nd Infantry Division's artillery fires 20,000 rounds that day. An average of more than 800 rounds per gun. The bombardment is so intense that German survivors report complete disruption. Telephone lines cut. Runners unable to move. Commanders losing contact with subordinate units. When American infantry advance behind the preparation, German resistance is disorganized. Ineffective. Hill 192 is captured by early afternoon, December 16, 1944. The Ardennes, German forces launch their surprise offensive. The Battle of the Bulge, they achieve tactical surprise. Make significant initial gains, but American artillery recovers within hours. On the northern shoulder near Elsenborn Ridge, American artillery plays the decisive role. The 1st Infantry Division and supporting units are backed by massed artillery. Divisional artillery. Corps artillery. Even artillery from adjacent sectors. Fire direction centers coordinate fire from 348 guns. This concentration of firepower is possible only because of the American system. No other army could rapidly organize such massive fire support. German infantry and armor attacking toward Elsenborn Ridge encounter devastating fire. Every attack breaks up. German commanders report that artillery fire is so intense, so accurate, that they cannot maintain attacks. Units attempting to advance are hit by time on target missions with no warning. Units regrouping are under fire within minutes. The 6th Panzer Army, the main German striking force, is stopped almost entirely by American artillery. Tank losses are so heavy that several panzer divisions lose more than half their armor. The German official history attributes the failure of the northern attack primarily to American artillery. Not American armor. Not air power, artillery. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne is surrounded. But they're supported by artillery battalions inside the pocket. And artillery firing from outside. Forward observers with the paratroopers call for fire constantly. German forces attacking Bastogne encounter the same pattern. Advancing troops hit by accurate massed fire. German commanders unable to concentrate forces because any concentration immediately draws artillery. German attempts at counter-battery fire become increasingly futile. American artillery has developed sophisticated procedures. Sound-ranging units use sensitive microphones to triangulate enemy gunfire. Flash spotting posts plot muzzle flashes at night. Aerial observers report visible artillery. Prisoner interrogations provide unit locations. All intelligence flows into fire direction centers. When German guns fire, American systems detect them within seconds. Coordinates go immediately to counter-battery fire direction centers. Highest priority. American doctrine calls for immediate suppression. German batteries firing more than a few rounds can expect counter-battery fire within 3 to 5 minutes. The result is steady degradation of German artillery effectiveness. Batteries that reveal positions by firing are suppressed. Destroyed. German artillery officers learn to fire brief missions and immediately displace. But displacement is time-consuming. Especially for horse-drawn artillery, which still comprises most German guns. Many batteries are caught and destroyed during displacement, others survive only by severely limiting activity. Firing only a few rounds per day. Only when the situation is desperate. The ammunition situation makes it worse. Allied air interdiction has devastated German logistics. Convoys under constant attack. Railroad lines bombed. Ammunition production declining as strategic bombing damages factories. German artillery batteries in Normandy operate under severe rationing. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne is surrounded. But they're supported by artillery battalions inside the pocket. And artillery firing from outside. Forward observers with the paratroopers call for fire constantly. German forces attacking Bastogne encounter the same pattern. Advancing troops hit by accurate massed fire. German commanders unable to concentrate forces because any concentration immediately draws artillery. German attempts at counter-battery fire become increasingly futile. American artillery has developed sophisticated procedures. Sound-ranging units use sensitive microphones to triangulate enemy gunfire. Flash spotting posts plot muzzle flashes at night. Aerial observers report visible artillery. Prisoner interrogations provide unit locations. All intelligence flows into fire direction centers. When German guns fire, American systems detect them within seconds. Coordinates go immediately to counter-battery fire direction centers. Highest priority, American doctrine calls for immediate suppression. German batteries firing more than a few rounds can expect counter-battery fire within 3 to 5 minutes. The result is steady degradation of German artillery effectiveness. Batteries that reveal positions by firing are suppressed. Destroyed, German artillery officers learn to fire brief missions and immediately displace. But displacement is time-consuming. Especially for horse-drawn artillery, which still comprises most German guns. Many batteries are caught and destroyed during displacement, others survive only by severely limiting activity. Firing only a few rounds per day. Only when the situation is desperate. The ammunition situation makes it worse. Allied air interdiction has devastated German logistics. Convoys under constant attack. Railroad lines bombed. Ammunition production declining as strategic bombing damages factories. German artillery batteries in Normandy operate under severe rationing. Documents show that German 5th Panzer Army artillery fires only about 10% of the ammunition volume that British artillery fires in the same sector. The disparity isn't due to fewer guns. It's lack of ammunition. German mobility is also inferior. American artillery is completely motorized. Every gun towed by a truck or mounted on a self-propelled chassis. The standard prime mover for the 105mm howitzer is the 2.5-ton truck. The Deuce and a Half. These trucks can tow howitzers at speeds up to 40 miles per hour on roads. Can traverse rough terrain impossible for horse-drawn artillery. Heavier guns require more powerful prime movers. The 155mm howitzer is towed by the M5 high-speed tractor. A tracked vehicle designed specifically for artillery. It can move heavy howitzers across virtually any terrain at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. The M7 Priest mounts a 105mm howitzer on a tank chassis. Each armored division has 54 of them. They can move and fight with the division's tanks. Travel at road speeds up to 25 miles per hour. Traverse any terrain tanks can cross. The crew can fire from the vehicle. The M7 can displace under fire and continue firing from moving positions. German artillery remains largely horse-drawn throughout the war. Germany mobilizes approximately 2.75 million horses during World War II. Each infantry division uses roughly 5,300 horses for artillery and logistics. A German artillery battery requires 150 to 200 horses to move 4 to 6 guns. Plus ammunition. Support equipment. The horses require constant care. Feeding. Rest. Each horse needs approximately 20 pounds of fodder per day. Horse-drawn artillery can move at most 25 kilometers per day under favorable conditions. In rain or mud, movement reduces to 10 kilometers per day or less. Hitching horses, moving the battery, unlimbering at a new position requires 2 to 3 hours under good conditions. The disparity is decisive. American motorized artillery can displace in 15 minutes and move 50 kilometers in an hour. German horse-drawn artillery needs hours to move and travels limited distances per day. Horses are vulnerable to artillery fire. Air attack. Disease. A battery losing significant horses to enemy action might be immobilized for days. Unlike trucks that can be parked and ignored, horses require constant attention. Artillery units allocate substantial personnel to horse care. Reducing men available for combat duties. German attempts to mechanize artillery in 1943 and 1944 come too late. Never reach sufficient scale. Some units receive half-track prime movers. Captured vehicles, but the majority remain horse-drawn until the end, December 1944. Another innovation multiplies American artillery effectiveness. The proximity fuse. It contains a miniature radio transmitter and receiver. Measures distance to the ground as the shell falls. When the shell reaches optimal burst height, typically 15 to 20 meters, the fuse detonates automatically. Every shell becomes an air burst. No complex time fuse calculations required. The weapon was developed in strict secrecy beginning in 1940. Used for anti-aircraft defense. In Pacific operations where unexploded rounds couldn't fall into enemy hands, but Pentagon officials restricted ground use in Europe. Fear that Germans might capture intact fuses. Reverse engineer the technology. The Battle of the Bulge changes the calculation. December 16, 1944. Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson of the 406th Artillery Group uses proximity-fused shells without authorization at Monschow, Germany. He decides the emergency overrides restrictions. He's right, the shells are devastatingly effective against attacking German infantry. General Eisenhower formally requests clearance on December 19. 2 days later, all restrictions are removed. Proximity-fused shells rush to the front. The effectiveness against troops in trenches and foxholes is dramatic. Contact-fused shells detonate on ground impact. Foxholes provide good protection. Proximity-fused shells detonate overhead. 15 to 20 meters up. No protection, casualties increase by an estimated factor of 3 to 4. The psychological effect is severe. German tactical doctrine emphasizes entrenchment. Overhead cover. Protection against artillery. Soldiers who survived months of combat using proper techniques suddenly find those techniques ineffective. Some German soldiers reportedly refused to take cover during bombardments. Reasoning there is likely to be killed in a foxhole as standing in the open. Unit cohesion suffers. Military historians estimate approximately 70% of all ground combat casualties in World War II are caused by artillery and mortar fire. 70%, not small arms. Not tanks. Not air attacks. Artillery, and American artillery is the most effective system in the war. The German army recognizes this even while the war continues. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding in Normandy, notes in reports to Hitler that American artillery coordination is far superior to German capabilities. Allied air control combined with highly effective artillery makes German counterattacks extremely costly. Usually unsuccessful, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein comments after the war on American trucks increasing Soviet artillery mobility on the Eastern Front. Lend-Lease American trucks allow Soviet artillery to reposition rapidly. Giving them mobility German horse-drawn artillery cannot match. The observation is significant. Even Soviet artillery, considered inferior to American in fire control, gains decisive advantage from American-supplied mobility. The American artillery system isn't a single invention. Not a dramatic technological breakthrough. It's the product of systematic institutional development over 2 decades. Officers at Fort Sill studied World War I, identified problems, developed solutions, tested procedures, trained thousands of artillery officers in new doctrine. The system works because every element integrates with every other element. Excellent maps with standardized grid coordinates. American forces have them. Distributed down to platoon level. Reliable radio communications. American artillery has powerful radios. Maintains communications even under difficult conditions. Trained forward observers who can accurately locate targets. American artillery trains them extensively. Embeds them with infantry at company level. Accurate meteorological data. American artillery battalions have meteorological sections providing regular weather updates. Survey teams to locate gun positions precisely. American artillery has survey sections in every battalion, detailed firing tables and graphical firing tables. American artillery develops and produces them in quantity. Supplies them to every fire direction center. Every element works together. Remove any single element and the system degrades, but with all elements functioning, the system delivers precision coordinated firepower no other army can match. German soldiers in foxholes learn to fear the sound of that Piper Cub engine overhead, because they know that sound means death is 3 minutes away. The Americans don't develop this system because they're smarter or braver. They develop it because they recognize the problem. Dedicate resources to solving it. Build institutions that can train soldiers and maintain equipment to execute doctrine. The German army has excellent artillery officers. Men who understand fire control as well as Americans, but German resources in the interwar period are constrained by the Treaty of Versailles. When rearmament begins in the 1930s, doctrine emphasizes tanks and close air support. Mobile warfare, artillery is important. But not the main focus. The Soviets have their own doctrine. Mass and overwhelming firepower. It works for them. For massive battles on the Eastern Front where targets are large and precision is less critical than volume, British artillery develops in different directions. Deliberate fire planning. Systematic preparation, highly effective. Respected by German opponents, but only the Americans combine speed, precision, flexibility, and overwhelming firepower into a single integrated system. Optimized for rapid response. Continuous adaptation to fluid tactical situations. The fire direction center system allows American artillery to function like a single weapon. Hundreds of barrels. All controlled by one mind. Capable of massing devastating fire anywhere within range within minutes, Major General Carlos Brewer, who pioneered much of the early doctrine, retires from the Army in 1946. He commanded the 12th Armored Division during training but isn't permitted to lead it in combat due to age. He requests reduction in rank to colonel so he can serve in Europe. He serves on Corps artillery staffs during 1944 and 45. Advising on fire control. Helping coordinate massive concentrations. After the war, he returns to Kentucky. Manages a small farm. Never seeks publicity. He dies in 1976 at age 85. Major General Orlando Ward has a longer career, commands the 1st Armored Division in North Africa. Later serves as commandant of the Field Artillery School during the war. After the war, he remains in the Army. Eventually retires as a lieutenant general. Writes extensively about combined arms operations. Publishes in professional military journals. He dies in 1972 at age 79. Neither Brewer nor Ward receives widespread public recognition. No monuments. No popular histories. Official histories mention them, but primarily in specialized military publications, not in popular accounts, yet their work saves thousands of American and Allied lives. Enables artillery to suppress enemy forces so effectively that infantry and armor can advance with reduced casualties. And their system kills tens of thousands of Axis soldiers who have no effective defense. The fire direction center concept spreads throughout the American military. Becomes standard NATO doctrine. After the war, the Soviets developed their own version. Though it remains less flexible than the American system, modern artillery fire direction descends directly from concepts developed at Fort Sill in the 1930s. Refined through World War II. Digital computers replace graphical firing tables. GPS replaces survey techniques, but the fundamental concept remains unchanged: centralized control. Precomputed data. Rapid coordination of multiple batteries. Flexible allocation of fire support. The story of American artillery superiority in World War II isn't a story of individual heroism. Though individual artillerymen certainly perform heroically. It's not a story of technological miracles. Though innovations like the proximity fuse are important. It's a story of systematic institutional development. Doctrine written carefully in peacetime by officers thinking about future wars. Training programs drilling procedures until they become automatic. Logistics systems supplying millions of shells to thousands of guns operating continuously for months. Communications networks keeping artillery coordinated under combat chaos. Maps and surveys and meteorological data and firing tables all prepared in advance. So when combat begins, the system works. Thousands of officers, non-commissioned officers, and enlisted soldiers learning their roles. Executing them professionally under intense pressure. The German army has excellent artillery equipment. Skilled crews, but Germany doesn't have a system. German artillery operates battery by battery. Limited coordination. No centralized control capable of rapidly massing corps-level fires against targets of opportunity. When German artillery faces an enemy with a true integrated system, backed by the largest industrial economy in the world. German guns are overwhelmed. May 8, 1945. The war in Europe ends. American artillery fires its last combat missions that morning. Suppressing scattered resistance in Czechoslovakia and Austria, the guns fall silent. Forward observers pack their radios. Fire direction centers shut down plotting boards. The system that broke so many German attacks stops operating, but it doesn't disappear. The doctrine survives. The training survives. The institutional knowledge survives. When American artillery goes to war again, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, the system works, the weapons change. The technology improves, but the fundamental concept remains: centralized fire direction. Rapid response. Flexible coordination. Massed fires delivered with precision against any target within range. That's how wars are won, not through spectacular battles or individual courage. Though those matter, wars are won through logistics. Training. Doctrine. Systematic execution, through officers in classrooms developing procedures. Technicians maintaining equipment. Logisticians moving supplies. Soldiers executing tasks professionally under pressure, through thousands of unglamorous activities that make military systems function. American artillery in World War II works because the system is carefully designed, thoroughly tested, properly resourced, professionally executed. German soldiers facing that system learn there's no defense, they can dig deeper, move faster, hide better. But when the Piper Cub appears overhead, artillery fire arrives with mathematical precision, that certainty, that inescapability, that mechanical efficiency of death from above. It breaks the Wehrmacht's ability to fight effectively in Western Europe, not tanks, not air power, artillery, the weapon Americans perfected through years of careful development. The weapon that gives no warning, offers no escape. The weapon that demonstrates modern war is won by systems and institutions rather than individual weapons or heroic actions. 3 minutes. That's all it takes. 3 minutes from the sound of that engine overhead to the moment everything ends. The German soldiers knew it. They counted it. They feared it, and there was nothing they could do to stop it.